Well, a very warm hello to those of you who are interested in a Meteor owner's view of the Meteor after 12 months. I am in no way a professional motorcycle rider or YouTuber, nor do I have any intention to be. It's just an honest kind of précis of what I've found over the last 12 months with this bike. There seems to be so much opinion and thought and goodness knows what in reviews. I've watched a lot of them because I'm interested in what people think and what they say. And the more I spend time with the bike, the more I can kind of start to filter and see my way through some of the, let's say, less helpful and more distracting reviews. Just in my opinion, I admit it is completely subjective, but that's the whole point of any review. It doesn't matter how independent you try to be, you are very subjective. I've listened to some excellent reviewers talk about this bike, and they've mentioned some very strange things. And then they've done a similar review of the Classic, and they've suddenly almost overcome all those things that they were worried about before, even though there's some basic similarities engineering wise between the two, putting aside any cosmetical change and rider position and things like that, of course. Anyway, lots of waffle, let me get on with it. So, in short, for those who don't like to watch a whole video and just want to get to the bottom line, I've had this for 12 months. Am I happy? Absolutely. Has anything ever gone wrong? No. It has been absolutely as I expected, and if anyone was asking me about this bike, whether they should buy it, I don't know. I mean, seriously, I can't tell you whether to buy it or not because there are so many variable factors. But if you've test ridden it, you've sat on it, you know it fits, it feels good, and you're just really looking for someone who's owned it for a while just to see if there's any gotchas on it, well, I can assure you, if you love it, just go right ahead and purchase it. It really is that good. Now, let's cover a few areas and a few bits and pieces that are quite common myths, questions, discussions and points about the bike. The first thing I'm going to address is the one that seems to cause most people concern, is the power. Will it be powerful enough for me when I want to go and do X, Y and Z? Will it keep up with all the expectations I have of a motorcycle? Should I go for something else that's much faster? And so on and so forth. Well, in all honesty, again, it's no one can tell you what you're looking for, because it doesn't matter if you're riding a 50cc motorbike or an 1800cc. You know, it's very subjective about what you want out of power and speed. And on paper, this bike is a 300 and I think it's 349cc, but they class it as a 350, and it has 20 point something brake horsepower. But there's slightly more engineering among the folks that I've listened to, and I'm not one of those, but I talk about torque. Now, torque is obviously it's something slightly different from horsepower, and 20 sounds low and 350cc doesn't sound great, but there's a little more torque with this. And you know, you can go into all the science and the engineering and the physics and the facts, but the truth of the matter is that it's plenty powerful enough. You can get out of trouble, you can do the speed limits, you can get up to speed in a reasonable time frame. You know, I've been on the motorway, and anybody who's watched any of my other videos have seen me, and I've been in the outside lane, not because I'm trying to be a hero, it's just literally the inside lane was super slow, the middle lane wasn't much faster, and I just needed to get past them, and it was more than safe. You know, I seem to have happened across a bit of a flow of bikers here, because ultimately that's what the Meteor is about. It's about enjoying the ride, enjoying the view. And we'll come on to a little bit of that in a moment. So let's get back to power. So yes, it's enough. It really is. It's all you'll need. I had fun on 50cc's, 100cc's, 185cc's. I've ridden RD 350 LC's, I've ridden Gamma 500 Suzuki's. You know, anything from very low power to extremely high power and lots of torque. and this is just fine. But there are some who want to experiment. You know, people want to tweak with their bikes, people want to play around with it, people want to just try different things, people want to just, well, experiment. That's kind of been the nature of motorcycling since goodness knows when. Well, one of the easiest upgrades to a bike like this is, of course, the DNA filter, which is quite well known. That's a pretty meaty exhaust there. Yeah, the DNA filter and filter cover. Now, there's been a lot of talk on this, and I decided to go ahead and replace the cover. Not the filter, because I've heard from people that the filter doesn't make any difference. The advantage of the DNA filter is it can be cleaned, as I understand, whereas of course the normal filter is just a replaceable, disposable filter. But here's the thing, there's kind of like a bit of a subjective viewpoint as to whether it makes a difference. Now, I remember watching a video a while ago, and someone had actually measured it, put it on a machine, and they claimed about 2 brake horsepower difference. So the answer is, it does make a difference. Actually, that might be a good example of it there. I just wanted to get past them safely, but that was lovely, the acceleration. So I put the filter on, and it really does make a difference to the power. There are people on here that seem on the kind of Facebook groups and the various discussions say it's made no difference, it hasn't done anything for me. I'm not doubting them. I'm not saying you're wrong. Who knows how their ECU is behaving? Who knows how their bike is set up? Who knows how it's been treated from you? How it's been running? Who knows what? There's just so many factors. What I can say is that a majority of people that I've read and listened to, and people I've learned to trust even remotely on these Meteors, and I can give it first-hand guarantee that I have found a definite improvement in performance. Absolutely no question. We're not talking it performs like a 600cc or a 1000cc. I mean, I'm not being ridiculous. The couple of brake horsepower sounds about right to me. A majority of the time, I take it easy. I just bimble around and just enjoy it. But every now and again, I want to just get past and just have a little bit extra power, just to instill a bit of confidence, and dare I say, put a bit of a smile on my face. Well, the filter cover with the hole in it, rather than the snorkel that comes with the bike from factory, does make a difference. I got mine from Hitchcock's because it was a bit cheaper. They basically machined some of these standard fitted filters and charged a lot less, but the DNA filter is available as well. The other thing it does is it does make the bike a bit louder. Don't know if you're picking that up, but if I accelerate you get a bit more throatiness, but at cruising speed it just drops back down to normal kind of sound again. Now, some people love that, and that's for them is enough, just to give it a little bit more of a meaty, thumpy sound. And that's great, but to be honest, it doesn't do it for me. That's not the reason I got it. I just wanted to get a little bit more, and just more of experimentation. Again, just loving the bike and learning about it. Now, the second thing I want to talk about is the gear changer. Well, since I've had this bike, I've used it and I absolutely love it. To me, it's one of the best ways of changing gear. I mean, I've ridden bikes. This is the first bike I've ever ridden with such a design. So yeah, I would give the gear stick. Now again, it's subjective. It's not for everyone, and those who don't like it, fine. I'm not saying, you know, they're wrong. I'm just saying, if you've only had it for an hour, you can't really comment on that. And yeah, I love this. Now, the next thing I'm going to talk about are the rear view mirrors. I remember in some of the early reviews people criticising these. They didn't like them and didn't think they were fit for purpose and they weren't working properly and so on and so forth. Well, I've got the same factory fitted mirrors since I got the bike, and they have been absolutely fine. Now, liking and fully functional, two separate subject matter experts. You know, you'll get one that will talk about what really looks good and one that talks about what's functional good. And remember, I'm neither of those. I am just an amateur bloke who just owns a bike and enjoys it. But the factory fitted mirrors are absolutely fine. Now, some people complained about the mirrors falling and not sitting properly and not being able to get them right. Absolutely correct. They are correct. You know, I had that problem too. And what happened was I got a spanner out and I tightened the nuts. It wasn't difficult. You know, I am the least mechanically minded person, or among the least mechanically minded person probably on any group. And I managed to figure out how to adjust them, get them to sit right. It took a bit of time, but they've been fine ever since. I've not had any problems. Now, obviously, cosmetically, the black mirrors, there are bar end mirrors, there are black ones that sit on the top, you know, those look really nice, and I'm not going to take away from that. I haven't invested in those. There are many reasons. There's just other things I was thinking of prioritising. But those are, you know, the mirrors are absolutely fine. I really like the mirrors. Now, the other thing that people often discuss on the channel is the saddle. The factory fitted saddle is, well, it's a mould. You know, it's just a kind of like a foamy mould. And I thought it was fine. You know, it felt soft, it was comfortable, and I couldn't see any reason to change it. Until I went to London. I went to West London, which from where I am is about an hour in the saddle. And about 90 minutes, an hour and 90 minutes of riding, my bum was just absolute agony. You know, I was not enjoying it at all. And I think it was on the way back from London that I decided that I was not going to, there you go, I'm doing 60 now, in a 60 limit, no problem. But I decided I was going to do something about the saddle. So I invested in one of the accessories, which was a touring saddle. And the touring saddle has been absolutely fantastic. I thought it was just a bit of a gizmo, really, just another reason to spend more money on the bike. And someone might say, who's looking at it from a practical, technical point of view, that there isn't much difference about the materials used. I couldn't tell you, I really don't know. The shape is very different. It's got a bit of a hump at the back. And that just seems to sit quite comfortably just below my coccyx. And that, strangely, it kind of makes me sit a bit more upright, which means that I become more conscious about my posture and my bum on the saddle, and it just seems to, it's a bit harder, so it just seems to just feel better. And I've not had any of the bum soreness that I had before. It is so much better. So touring saddle is one accessory that I've added that I absolutely love. Now, the other thing I'm going to talk about is the Tripper, the satellite navigation that comes with the Royal Enfield. I mean, on spec, it's a great system. It just syncs up with your Google Maps on your phone. You don't sync it with that, you sync it with the Royal Enfield app, and away you go. You put in your destination, and then it gives you a series of arrows and pointers and roundabouts. Now, there's been a lot of kind of debate on this amongst riders. You know, some people love it, some people hate it. There seems to be a bit of a controversy about what people's views are, and I've seen a lot of discussion on the topic. So here's my view, and again, it's just subjective. It's good enough. It's not perfect. You know, I love the satellite navigation that does actually give you a kind of a view of the road, and you can kind of see what's happening and what's coming up. That just makes so much sense to me. It takes a bit of getting used to, because it uses a different set of codes. You know, it uses arrows and numbers. But I found it absolutely fine. I've been to a few destinations where I didn't know where I was going, and I was wholly and solely reliant on the sat-nav, and it got me there. I've tried it when I know where I'm going as well, and again, it's fine. There have been some updates since I've had it over the years to the app, so you now have more choices, more options when you're selecting a destination. But yeah, I'd say it's good enough. Would I buy one, the sat-nav, as a separate, as an add-on? Do you know, I probably wouldn't, because good enough is okay, but it's not been great. It seems to get a bit confused at roundabouts, and it ends up kind of pointing you in a kind of a random pattern of where you need to go. You know, you'll come to a roundabout and it will say exit 1, but actually you need to take exit 3. It kind of knows where you should go, because if you take exit 1 it then reroutes you back to the correct way. But you know, things like that are not really ideal. So it's good enough, and I'm happy with it, and I use it, so it's absolutely fine. If I became more serious about navigating and travelling and touring and going to places where I've never been before, then, you know, I might be a little bit more curious about a mount for the phone to get better sat-nav. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is reliability. Now, just bear in mind, I'm not a, you know, I've said this before and I'm going to say it again, I really am not an expert in these things. But before I get to the reliability, I just want to talk a bit about how I've treated the bike. When I got it from new, and it literally was brand new, delivered to the showroom, and I was the first person to ride it, I took this very, very easy. I was extremely careful in the first 50 miles because I knew the tyres needed breaking in. And then for the first few hundred miles, I followed the manufacturer's kind of guidance. It might have blipped over a mile an hour or two or something, you know, but I was just literally local roads, doing everything it said. And that included, once I got it out of the garage, starting it up and letting it run and warm itself up. Now with cars, they seem to want you to drive it as soon as possible. They don't want you leaving it running, which is why in the winter they don't like you leaving it running to keep it warm for you. It can be, some manufacturers don't recommend that, but with this bike I noticed in the manual it did say let it warm up before you ride off. So I do, I give it, it's about 5 minutes it gets, sometimes a bit more. And then when I start riding, I'm always, even since running, I'm always very cautious about how I do it. And by the way, I've done 1,490 miles as I speak to you. I may even hit the 1,500 by the time I get home, who knows. But we're about 1,500 miles in, and I have taken it very easy from running in, taking it very easy when I start it, and I always let it warm up. So with that known, with that said, let's just talk a little bit about the reliability. Well, it's been absolutely perfect. Absolutely 100% perfect. I have never had an engine management light, which I know some people have reported. I've never had any problem with the battery, which some people have reported. I've never had any slippages out of gear, which some people have reported, although more on the Classic I'm hearing that, which makes me wonder whether the foot pedal configuration on the Meteor might be something that's just better suited to the gearbox. I don't know. But it's just been great. You know, I don't ride it every day through the winter. I'm a fairly irregular fair weather rider. Well, you can tell by the mileage. I've had it over 12 months and quite a low mileage compared to some. I think some have done almost 20,000 miles in my 1,500 mile time frame. But yeah, so reliability, 10 out of 10, been great. The basic maintenance that I've done, and I mean basic, apart from the way I look after the way I ride it, is checking the oil regularly, which isn't difficult. It's on a centre stand, so I just look at the oil through the window. And I check the tyre pressures. Now when I first got it, I was checking the tyre pressures weekly, every couple of weeks. As time's gone on, it's now nearer monthly. And even on a couple of occasions, particularly when I've not ridden it for a while, it'll be a couple of months. So I'm not going to pretend that is that regular, but I know the tyres so well, and they don't lose anything. They're pretty good. I've adjusted the suspension to play around with that. The chain I've regularly lubed. I had some nice covering on that, the garage when I picked it up, nice white stuff, and that lasted for a long time. But I lube it regularly, and over the winter I lube it, and it would stay longer and longer as I obviously wasn't riding it. And there was one long period where I went back out after a month or two of not riding it, and went out, started fine, rode fine. But when I got back, I had a look. I noticed that some rust had started to appear on the chain. So I was a bit worried. I thought, oh dear, that's a sign of a poor quality chain, is it, or whatever? And maybe it is, maybe it isn't, I don't know. There are more experts out there than me. But what I did is I bought a chain cleaning brush, some chain cleaning fluid, and just mustered up a bit of elbow grease, and it came up fantastic. And then I lubed it, and I just keep it lubed regularly now, so the chain is spot on. It's exactly as I want it. And I fuel it, you know, I fuel, and I actually add I do add the kind of the premium fuel every other fill up, at least every other fill up, sometimes more, sometimes less, just to kind of help with the, you know, the overall efficiency of the bike. So yeah, that's kind of the limit of my mechanical skills and the reliability. Now, another accessory that I purchased for the bike was the fly screen that you might be able to see on the camera now. I made a video about putting that together, and just while I'm at it, just to kind of couple them together, I also got a thing for the headlamp, a peak for the headlamp. Now I'm going to put those both in the same category, because some people ask, does the fly screen make any difference to the wind? Well, yes. I mean, you know, you've got the physics of actual airflow, and of course it's going to change the airflow. So if you put your hand behind it, it's, you know, you're not going to get any air, except, but in terms of actual rider comfort and deflecting wind, in my opinion, zero. You know, no difference at all. It is a pure cosmetic addition, just like the peak on the headlamp, purely cosmetic. There's nothing actually that adds to the ride. It's just something which I quite like. So those are two accessories that I added. So I think that's up to 4 accessories I've mentioned so far. So we've got the air filter cover with the big hole in it. We've got the peak on the headlamp. We've got the fly screen. I thought I mentioned a 4th one. Have I lost count? No, maybe there's just the 3 so far. Well, let me give you a 4th. This camera. I added the camera to the helmet. And actually I've added a bag as well, a couple of bags which I've got. Not panniers, just bags. I've got a trip machine which sometimes sits on the tank. It's currently sat behind me, strapped to the back seat. And I've also got another one which is a 10-litre Rhino, I think Rhino Walk or something like that. So those are kind of the accessories that I've added. But yeah, the peak and the fly screen, purely cosmetic. And I like that. You know, I like them. They're just tasteful things that I just enjoy. Actually, the last thing that's worth mentioning is the comfort. I know I've talked to the saddle, but the slightly forward riding position, the handlebars, just makes for such a comfortable bike. I'd struggle to find anything that would be more comfortable than a Meteor. I'm not saying it wouldn't be better in other ways, but it really is just a wonderful ride. Now, it's all been good so far. I've told you everything I love about the bike. There are a couple of downsides, a couple of things that I've not been overly impressed with. Nothing major, but worth mentioning, so it shows that I am not just trying to just show all the shiny good side of the bike. Now, the first thing are the lights. The headlamp, quite honestly, is not great. Now, obviously, I'm comparing it with modern day headlights. There are some upgrades out there. I have not as yet upgraded it for 2 reasons. One, because I'm not actually out very often at night. I am a fair weather rider, as I mentioned earlier. though I have on a couple of occasions had the need to, but I really don't go out at night very much, so I haven't really felt the urge to. And secondly, and probably more prominently, I don't know what to get. There seem to be a few people that always recommend what they've bought, but there's not a consensus at the moment, you know, because I'm not very good at these things. I'm not really very good at making my own decisions, and also I'm not very technically minded in that respect. I do know enough to know that the wrong type of bulb with consuming the excessive amount of amps can cause your fuse to be strained and can have effects, and if you get it too dull, it's just not even worth changing. So I just need to research that a bit more about a headlight. And the second thing is the headlight is too dim, but the dials on the speedo and the sat nav are way too bright. I mean, crikey, you know, there's almost a joke where you could swip around the headlight, point that in your face, and put the speedo on the road, and you'd probably get better output. But it's just not really for me, the lighting on this. And those, you know, although the headlight, you might sort of say, well, that's cost saving, that's a way of cost saving, etc. It's just, I think that the dials have been poorly thought through, because that's just crazy, having that level of brightness in your eyes. Problem. Something else which I'm okay with, I want to emphasize, I'm okay with this, but it is a criticism, is one thing that I'm not quite sure about, and that's the suspension. The suspension on this bike is not very comfortable. When it hits holes and bumps, it doesn't seem to do as great a job as perhaps it could. Oddly enough, when I was 2 up and I tightened it, it felt more comfortable than 1 up. So yeah, it's just, it's okay, you know. I just think that that's something that if I was going to change, I might invest in that, but there's a lot of money to invest in that, and for the little riding I do, you know, I wouldn't bother. If I was going to do a tour across Europe or something mega, maybe, or even across the UK, but you know, I'm really splitting hairs here. You know, the suspension and the lights are kind of things you can upgrade and change, and you're getting a really good bike for the price, but those are a couple of the downsides to it. There is one other thing which I found a little disappointing, and that is the catalytic converter. Now, I remember when I first got the bike, there were people online talking about and showing photos of how their cat converters had rusted quite excessively. Some of them had barely done any miles, so it was almost as though water might have got into them before they'd even ridden it and somehow just corroded it. Mine was very black and covered, and I remember asking on a Facebook group about what people do to protect it, and I got some stuff to spray, some protection, corrosive protection, which is quite common for motorbikes, and I regularly put that on. But I've noticed that the catalytic converter has lost its paint and it's starting to look a little corroded. I don't really know how serious it is. I'm going to be putting it in for its well, it says 3,000 miles for the first service, but it also says 6 months and a year, so I'll call my dealer and see what they recommend, but I'll ask them about it when it goes in for a service next. It's not a major problem, because there are people who are fitting decap pipes and there are people who are doing all sorts of changes, but I'm not really bothered about a decap pipe. I'm just kind of not going to spend that sort of money, just going to enjoy it for what it is. But yeah, that's just a slight worry. So, the problems: headlight too dim, dials too bright, suspension too firm, and the cat box corrodes a little too easily. I think that really is about it, you know. And those last things, don't let them put you off. If you're thinking of buying and you're listening to this, do not let it put you off. Those really are minor things. There is nothing insuperable. You're talking about a £4,000 bike, roughly, give or take, new, 3 years warranty, 3 years roadside assistance. If you buy it new, you know you can look after it really well, and you can run it in, and you can get it, just so you know, from day one it's being taken care of to the best of your ability, and you'll get all the coverage from the service dealer. If you buy it second hand, you can save a fortune. You know, the numbers they're talking about, you know, late twos, I think I've seen mid to late twos on these bikes. I mean, some of them low twos when they trade it in. So, you know, there are some bargains to be had out there. But this bike is a great bike, and I do love it dearly, and it's been everything I wanted in a bike, everything I needed. Yeah, it's been spot on. So, as I said at the beginning, in summary, I am very, very happy. Oh look, I've just hit 1,500 miles. Just then, 1,500. So I guess I can honestly say that is a 1 year, 1,500 mile review from someone who knows nothing about bikes but loves everything about bikes. Just my experience. Anyway, that's enough waffling. That'll do for me. I think I'll just let a little music play and enjoy the view for the rest of the ride.